Welcome everyone. We're glad you take some time out today to join us for the webinar discussion about MIRUS and its plugins. My name's Alan Wilson, and I'll be one of the presenters. The other presenter will be Keith Hunt, and you can see there are email addresses, so you can also, if you don't have those already, contact us directly too. With that, we will get started. I think, Keith.
Hey, welcome everybody. As Alan mentioned, we're going to step through some kind of the high-level features of MIRUS and also some of the plugins, just to give you a broader understanding of some of the things you can do with MIRUS. And then say if you got questions, go ahead and type those in, and we'll try to get to those at the end. So MIRUS is one of those programs that really has a nice interface. It's very powerful, easy to navigate around. It is compatible with all of our grain gauges, but we're also using it with other devices and other products that we're gonna talk about today. One of the nice features about MIRUS is the ability to generate field maps on the fly, or you can import them from Excel, ARM, Agribase, or any other proprietary software, as long as it's in a CSV format. So you can have a lot more information for the users at their fingertips as they're using the software. We have several features which allow you to look at real-time data, so you can do some quick validation, look at trends, and just make sure that the quality of the data that your users are seeing is working and everything is performing as expected. With exporting, you can export your finished data into Excel, and we also have functions to export heat maps, which we will talk about later. And of course, in calibration, we've set up a lot of wizards to make it simpler and easier to calibrate the weight, the moisture, and the test weight, and step users through all that process to simplify and make sure the system is operating as expected.
One of the there's a lot of data that you can have right at your fingertips. Most of the screens that we have are customizable, so the information the operators can see, no matter whether on a grain gauge or some of the other plugins, you can make that information available that's important to the operator. Within the grain gauges, you can see trends, individual cycle data, and summary of the plot data. And we'll be showing you some screens here that kind of show you what these would look like. The heat maps can be live, so you can just see trending as you're going through the field. You can have the diagnostics menu up, so you can at least see what's going on. You can watch your bucket cycle. A lot of this data it can't be you can't go in and work on the diagnostic screen unless you're out of cycling. And then the other thing is we have note-taking capability both during harvest and these are the different type traits that can be trait types. So you could have a pick list that lets you choose what your responses are, and then date and number type traits.
So this is an example of the main MIRUS screen. You can connect to different plugins by pressing the plus button, and allows you to connect to grain gauges or add other plugins that we have. And of course, the menu items across the middle there allow you to select and select maps, or go into different functions, or go into setup and calibration.
This is one of the harvest screens. This as you can, the quad view, as we call it, this little button down here is the one that lets this menu come up, and then you can modify which screens or what type screens you're showing in each quadrant. Just a little briefly, this one is kind of the map view data, or the map as you're going through, showing a graphic view of the data that's been done. And this is kind of an average of all the plots harvested so far for a yield. And this is really, it is yield that we've calculated, average moisture for the map, and then your average test weight for that. Here's the view of the data that just has been collected. Another view, a form view, which shows previous plots of data, so you can look back to see what's happening, and then a spatial screen. This one is just set to arrange rows, so we're just showing you what plot have been harvested. That would be the brown tan colored here, or orange, and then what plot you are on is highlighted. And these screens can be changed to show different things on that screen.
So as Alan mentioned, you can customize a little bit what you see in this harvest screen. In this example, we still have the trending data in the upper left, and in the bottom left we have data from a twin plot where you can see the data from the left side and the right side that we just harvested. Over to the right, we've actually changed our spatial screens and put up a couple spatial screens so that you can see heat maps of moisture and heat maps of weight. And by clicking on the gear icon on the left right-hand side, you can customize and set your range so that the heat map makes the most sense to you, so that you can set your min max and also the settings to get the best information. The four yellow squares at the bottom, that's how you can customize and change the quad screen. Other screens that are available with the quad are a diagnostic screen, there's real-time data screens, you can look at cycle data screens. If you add GPS, you can look at a field view that shows GPS position. So you can customize all that. Also, these center bars can be moved up and down and right and left to get maximize the information that you want to see.
This shows one of the heat maps that's been exported. So we exported in a CSV format so it can be opened up in Excel. This is just a view only after we have exported, so you can't come back. You can't come in and change your scaling anymore to change the colors, but it is at least you have it exported, then you can go through and look and use it for editing your data. If you see different spots, if you got some red squares, you can take a look to see maybe what something's happened there or things. So it is nice for an editing tool after harvest.
So now we're going to transition to the other plugins that are, so some of the other plugins that are available with MIRUS. That's one of the nice things about MIRUS is the ability to, we can customize MIRUS by just adding these individual plugins. These individual plugins allow settings to change, setup screens to change, also harvest or data collection screens can change as well. So some of the plugins we're going to talk about today is our GNSS GPS plugin, which allows you to do some layout and GPS navigation. A field applicator or sprayer, which connects to a multi-tank sprayer. We have a newer plugin now that allows us to interface to a cone planter or a seeder, which then will do a trip at set points in each plot. Our conditional action is within MIRUS, and that allows us to customize some of the other functions and use other available actuators to control subsamplers and bring the grain samples into the cab. We have zebra label printers, which allows you to pre-print or print labels on the fly as you're harvesting. And then, of course, we interface to Polytec and other NIR sensors. And then we do have the ability to create some custom plugins. And so if you have some custom needs, contact us and we can talk about those and try to make those plugins to meet your needs.
So this is just one of, is the opening screen or home screen of MIRUS, where you can see we have a lot of plugins stacked. So we can open multiple plugins at one time and use them in a kind of a stacked way. The person using an H2, one thing with their H2 software and grain gauges is all the user has to do is just select it's an H2, and our software can determine what grain gauge exactly you are using, whether it be a classic, a triple, a single, or whatever else. The conditional action that Keith just mentioned, we have that one enabled. We're using the GNSS attachment to show where we're at in a field or do some tripping. Zebra printer, which we'll talk about later also, but it's also being used as part of this harvest that this person's getting ready to do.
Okay, so with the MIRUS GNSS plugin, some of the basic features of it is being able to do what we call the field layout, where you can go to a worked up field and start determining where you want to put your plots and setting the four corners. We'll show you a little more detail about that in a minute. You can also use it to, as I mentioned, to trip planters. Also with the field applicator, it knows the location you are, and so as you're just driving through a field, spraying or providing applying other materials, it knows as you make transition from one plot to the other and can automatically make those switches. Of course, with note taking, you can use it to navigate to a number of different locations within the field, and it shows you as you're walking where your current location is and the distance and bearing to the plot that you want to navigate to. And then we can add the GPS to the combine so that it will record GPS position as you're cycling. It will show you which plot that you're on as you're cycling. And then you can also do some things if you're in what we call strip mode. You can cycle the grain gauge based on a set distance. So then you can kind of create these yield maps where you cycle at a set distance and continue to harvest along, and then come back and look at that type of yield map and see variations in the field.
So here, part of one of the MIRUS GNSS screens that we have, the GNSS plugin, it's compatible with all NEMA type GPS receivers. And if we can get connected and get the NEMA strings, from your receiver, it can be used with this plugin. This just is showing typical, I guess, most GPS software, but a sky plot, or it's showing the different satellites that's in use, our data, the quality or the fix that we're at can be described here or looked at here. The NEMA console will come up showing what NEMA strings are being sent out. You can configure and position. So this is just all this kind of diagnostics for the GNSS, but you can know a lot of the things for getting it set up and just where you're at and kind of data you're getting in from your receiver.
So the first step in setting up and using the GNSS plugin is what we call field layout. And in this function here, you go into a field, and again, you can set up and generate the 4 corners. And you start that first by determining your first corner. In this example, it's the bottom left. You can start in any of the corners. You can also start right next to fence rows. There's ways to adjust it, your field out into the field if you want to make sure you're parallel to a fence row or a road or something like that. But you start by capturing point A, and then move to any of these other corners or toward that direction. You don't always have to go right to the corner, but then you can set down and set point B, and then it will draw in the whole field and show you your current location. So then you can navigate to those different locations to make sure this is where you want the field to be located.
And once you have got that field kind of initially set up, then if you start walking and going along and you find that, well, it needs to be adjusted slightly, you can come back in, you can reset the corner, you can shift it one direction or another, and just kind of get it to fit into the actual field once you have it drawn out and things. A lot of times during the layout, you're not going the full corners. You just do a cut, and then it does more of the projections for you. This gets you physically then to where you could make any adjustments needed.
Okay, so once you got your field set up, you can go in and then and generate GPS positions for each plot. By doing that, again, you use an AB line wizard. You set the plot length, you set the alley length, the number of ranges and rows, all that information, and then it will generate a GPS coordinate with each plot. And what this allows you to do is you can navigate to that plot. And in this example, it shows my the bar in here that shows me my current position and my distance to the plot that I'm going to, in this case 1-1, and the bearing that I have to go to that. It shows, so again, it shows you your implement location in the field, and so you can navigate to specific plots. As mentioned, you can with this GNSS plugin, you can cycle your grain gauge based on a distance at the end of each plot, or you can warn the operator that you've reached the alleyway and they need to go ahead and press cycle button, or it can automatically cycle when it gets a certain point in the alley. A lot of this is designed to just automate the whole setup so that takes some of the guesswork out of the operator's hands.
So next plugin we wanted to discuss with you is the field applicator or / sprayer, I guess is how we've also determined or been calling this. It operates what we in research that guys use, multi-tank sprayers or even a fertilizer spreaders at different rates and that you can do. We'll show you some pictures so you kind of have an idea when we talk about multi-tank sprayers, what we're talking about. What it does is we just are hooking our software up to the control valves that are already there on the sprayer, and then we just turn them off and on via a GPS says, okay, we're at this plot. You look at the imported map that you've imported into MIRUS that then says, oh, I should apply such and such chemical, and we turn that sprayer on that you've made that association to a tank, to a specific chemical that you want to apply. We can also use this on planters to apply starter fertilizer or soil inoculant, other granular material. It does run independent of the planters, so we're not able to stack this in the planter software together at this point anyway. But it can, if you have that on your planter, we do have the ability to apply those. Also, dry fertilizer, we can do a dry fertilizer band, and these are a couple of the things we've done so far. It's very versatile because if you have anything that just needs where we can control valves, turning them on and off, we can get it hooked up to work that way, and with the import with MIRUS, take some of the guesswork out and automate these applications.
So here's an example of a multi-tank sprayer. With the multi-tank sprayer, or field applicator as we call it, you can control up to 24 tanks with 24 of what we call the booms, which are used to the, I guess the hoses or lines across the back here. And with the GPS, it automatically knows when you've hit that point when it needs to transition. You go in and make some changes so that you see that each, with the first boom is got a slightly different position as the last boom, and so we can make that adjustment using the GPS and create an offset so that each boom starts at the same plot as you go into the next plot.
Here's another multi-boom sprayer. This, I can see it's rigged up more onto a highboy type situation, but still just another example of how different types that we can. This isn't one all fits. They've got to be on a specific piece of equipment. It's just different people that have built these. The one thing this is just doing one plot wide at a time. So we're not able to do multi-plots across, so it's just a single plot width as we go down through the fields.
So this is a typical what we call the spraying screen, which is normally the harvest screen if you're connected to a grain gauge, but in the field applicator, this is your sprayer screen. So you can set it up so that you can see which booms are turning on. Bottom left-hand corner is your field view, which shows your GPS. Upper right shows you kind of what's being sprayed, position, things like that. The most important screen is the one at the bottom right. In this example, we've imported a field map that has a chemical name for each plot. And in the setup, you go in and you tell it which boom correlates to each of those chemicals. And so then as you drive through the field, it automatically knows it's going to spray the Roundup tank or the headline or the dual. It's going to spray those on the right particular plots based on the field map that you've imported. You can have multiple tanks turned on at the same time. In that case, you would just go into your field map and it would say, Roundup and dual or whichever chemicals you want to spray together. They would both be labeled inside the inside of each plot, and it knows that it's going to turn on each of those tanks that's corresponding to that plot. You can also just import maps with numbers. So it says on this plot I want to spray tank 1, on the next one I want to spray tank 2, and so forth.
So the next plugin we wanted to briefly talk about is the cone planter. This is very new for us. It kind of is an offshoot from what the applicator, that's why we had that field applicator, but this became more of a specific request. We got more and more is to be able to control these cone planters. And basically, same thing, we're integrating it in with MIRUS software, so the maps, everything that's there, the regular MIRUS is available. This is controlling of the simple cone style planters. We can here use the tractor GPS also to trip the cone planter. So you're not required to have a separate GPS for this plugin. We will record that GPS location at the time of tripping, so then you'll have a map that has all the trip points from the planting. It's compatible, like anything. This uses the GNSS plugin like we've been talking about in the other ones, so we can use any NEMA string receiver. And the planter type really doesn't matter if you've got electric or hydraulic air, or how the actuators or lifts the cones up. We can connect to those. We have multi-staging. We can have about 2 different stages on the cone. Can also do a marker if you want to do a ground marker system. So a lot of this is used to eliminate the cable situation, so you don't have to be pulling a cable across the field, or hand tripping if you still have a hand trip system where you're just pushing the button. Currently we've used this more on 4 rows, but it can be expanded, to 6 or 8 row planters. But basically everything we've been working on is 4 to 6 rows anyway. We do have a pause button, so if you need to stop somewhere in the field and pull out and change, we can pause, so we're not tripping and getting misinformation stored in the map. And the other thing is we'll see is on a screen where we do show you the field map and to show you where you're located at in the field because of the GNSS plugin. So yeah, just to be clear, this is the traditional simple cone planter or seeder mechanism that we're interfacing to. That typically has some kind of a cone gate where you're dumping the seed into the funnel, and then at a specific point, it's lifting the cone gate and dropping the seed down into the distributor. As mentioned, that we can also control additional actuators like a spray marker or a staging gate if you have that. There is some calibration wizards to help you get things lined up so your seed placement is matching, with each plot, and it using the GPS, it takes into account your driving speed so that it knows when to trip to get your seed placed at the right point. So this is just the planting screen, can't call it the harvest screen, but this is a quad view is the best way, I guess, to call it, because we use this, quad view with all these plugins, so you have this information in front of you. And this is just one of the quad views set up from the cone planter, showing GPS position data that was recorded for the plot, this plot that's done. Here they have their diagnostic screen up, so you can watch the actuators to make sure they are opening and closing. And this would update as you're going through your field view, so knowing what's planted, where your implement is at, direction, your heading, ground speed, which is kind of important with seeding. If you keep a consistent ground speed, then you get better spacing off with your cone planters. And then the spatial view is just showing you what plot is planted, and it would show you all the different plots planted. One of the other things that is recorded, in a log, we have a log file with this too, just like all of our grain gauge or MIRUS application. So there's a whole other data stored in that could be used for other purposes as you're needed for recording, data recorded anyway.
One of the really nice features about this cone planter that we've added in is the ability to plant what we call our stack plots. And so in this example here, you've got a block of 4 inches deep, separated by a larger alley, and then another block of 4 inches deep. And so you can set this up to where you specify the number of plots in your stack or your block, and then what's with the normal alleyway of, however that is, but then you specify what that stacked alley or that larger gap between the next block is. And so you can continue to plant at the same speed. You don't have to stop. It knows when it gets to the end of the block, it's going to have this larger alley. And then as it gets to the beginning of the next block or stack, then it will go ahead and continue the sequence. Again, in this example, we got four ranges by 4 ranges with basically what we call a 10-foot stacked alley in between.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. Plugin that we have, we mentioned this at the beginning also, is the conditional action. This is a powerful tool. It's a software tool. It just allows us to come in and make some customizations to systems that's already installed there. So we could work with some of the grain handling systems as far as sample taking. If you have an NIR system below the grain gauge, we can stage gates so we make sure we get the grain presented to the NIR data at the right time and still keep the the grain gauges working above in the correct order. Blowers, there's just a whole lot of things that can be done with this conditional action. It does require probably our field service guys to help get these set up, because it's writing scripting and doing some special programming and getting everything set in the right order and stuff. One of the real cool things is the reduce, or you can set this thing up to where if you're doing sample taking and if you're a plot weight, you want a minimum plot weight. So if you're in soybeans or some crop, the grains, you don't want to save seed unless it yielded such and such a weight. We could set that parameter to happen, and then if that weight isn't met, it would just go directly to the grain tank. If it meets the weight, then it would come to the sampling, into the sampling system. You could save that sample for that, or any of the other traits, because we can monitor the moisture or the test weight also. But it can be used in that way also, for in the field sample taking.
So this is the typical setup screen. As mentioned, typically our service guys are there to help set up these conditional actions and make sure they're all working. But you can have several of these conditional actions programmed and running at the same time. They all have different, what we call evaluation points, which could be when the plot is completing, when you're pressing the enter button, when the countdown timer goes to 0. Any of those things can start the conditional action. And we can also do conditions where, if you're subsampling or something and want only sampling on certain plots, you can say, oh, only on a specific ID in the map do I want to sample, or trigger the conditional action. And then you set up conditions where you're opening, recycling the actuators, you're creating delays, other things like that. And so, like I said, these can get pretty complex, especially when you add things like controlling an NIR or subsampling and bringing samples to the cab.
So the next plugin we're going to talk about is this Zebra label printer plugin, and so this is a plugin that we've developed to use a Zebra label printer, obviously, but it's to be put right in the cab, so we can put it right in the cab of the combine. So then the labels can be generated right at the time of harvest. Bringing them in, already tagged bags, or just the tags there and trying to keep them all in order. They'll just be printed as you go. Part of the neat part about doing it in the field is if you want to print the data that you've collected from the grain gauge, that can also be applied to the label. And we'll show you some examples of some labels here in a bit. We can print the barcode if it's in the map. We can print the barcode and other plot information right on the label. And then, like I said, this is a zebra that printer that we interface with. And some of the benefits we see is the no need to do printed labels. I mean, it saves you some time and also cost. And you can customize the labels to give you the information you want in the field.
So here's an example of one of the Zebra printers and some labels that have been customized. You can see there's, it gives you the range and row information. You can print on a 2D and also a 1D type barcode. Also, you can print multiple labels. So if you want to have a label printed out to put it inside the bag, you can print a couple labels. So one goes inside the bag and one goes outside the bag. Also, you can set it up to where it's printing labels at the beginning of the plot or at the end of the plot.
Like I said, this is an example of a label that we've printed in the field. Put the range row information here. This is brought out of MIRUS. You can see we're doing both 2D and 1D barcodes with the information on it. Not 100% knowing whatever, but there's a lot of information, like I said, that they've got on this tag. So as they bring it back into the lab, they've got their information they need to take the sample into the lab and work with it.
Okay, I think this is the last plugin we're going to talk about. We can interface to what's called the Polytec NIR infrared sensor. And how this plugin basically works is it's interfacing to the Polytec HOP software. The HOP software allows you to customize and you create all the settings for the NIR sensor itself. So then if you're wanting to get things like the protein, oil, starch, or other constituents right as you are harvesting in the field, MIRUS will control that NIR sensor. It can control the basically presentation of the seed across the NIR head. It turns on the NIR sensor so that it scans, starts to scan at a certain time and shuts off the scan at a certain time. And then, of course, all of the NIR data is stored, summary data is stored directly into MIRUS. So as you export, you've got your regular plot data, plus you've also got your NIR summary data. And this is used quite heavily with the conditional action to control the NIR function, and then also controlling the samples and bringing them to the NIR sensor in a lot of different ways.
Okay, as Keith said, that brings us to the end of our presentation. Looks like we're a little bit over time, but not a lot. Looks like from my screen here, it's hard to see, but I think we have got some questions that's been asked. Hopefully maybe Keith on your end will be able to read them better, but we'll maybe take a couple of minutes to answer a few of these. Like I said, if not, we'll get back in touch with you. For those that don't want to hang around for this part of it, thank you for attending. If you do have questions, concerns, whatever, please reach out to us. As many of you know, the ASTA meeting's next week. It will be virtual. We are set up to be there at the virtual ASTA show. So if things come up, just contact us next week, and we'll be happy to talk to you more and look forward to 2021 and have a good holiday season.
Yes, feel free if you want to drop off, you're welcome to. I'll kind of go through these questions that we have here, just a quick little answer. And I think some of them is going to require a little bit more follow-up. First question is can the MIRUS GNSS GPS work with different type GPS receivers? And yes, it can. We work with John Deere, Trimble, Ag Leader. As long as the GPS receiver has a NEMA output and we can interface to that. We do recommend that you have an expert on your specific GPS receiver available so that you can they can get it programmed correctly to make sure that the output and the certain strings that we need in the NEMA string are turned on. and so that's what we recommend there.
Keith, also, I think cablings, some of these, use different type cabling to connect to outside sources too. So we got some general cabling, but more specific from ones too would be important.
That's correct, yep. So the next question has to do with being able to adjust the hopper weight trip point for a specific crop. We may need to get back with you on that. There is some steps in our user guide on how to make some adjustments to the hopper, and it's either setting the maximum capacity of the bucket, how much goes into the chamber, and how much where the trip point is for whether it's a twin, where the level settings are, or if it's a single or a classic, where the bucket capacity is. So we can send you some things there to do that. The next question, I'll just throw it out there. It looks like the individual is offline, and he's asking about downloading a specific file with GPS coordinates for each plot. At the moment, we cannot import any kind of field information with GPS, but it's fairly easy to do a quick A/B line to get the GPS coordinates. In the future, we hope to have the ability to import and export GPS stuff. Next question is, how much hardware is needed to be able to share a planter and a sprayer? The planter sprayer is pretty much the same hardware. We basically have a box with actuators in it, and that you could move from one implement to the other. What you'd have to have on each implement is probably like power cables and just some of the cables. Again, if it's connecting to a sprayer, you'd need to have the actuator cables to connect each valve. But the main box, the main function can be moved from one device to the other. Can you show how to export a heat map? Within the map setup, there's a place where you can do that. We actually have a really nice video that shows you how to configure and set that heat map. So we can send that out to Brad. I think you're the one asking for it. Anyone else wants to see that information, you can find it on our YouTube channel or on our HarvestMaster website. But we'll send you a link to that so you can see what the steps are of configuring and exporting heat maps. Can the cone planter software be used to plant on a circle? I don't believe at the moment that it can, but that is something, again, that a feature that we're looking at for the future.
Yeah, and I would just say from product management, that's where Lucas will probably, I don't know if we've had some inquiries about that in the past. Be happy to reach out and talk to you here about the specific needs on that and get it better defined.
The next question is, what are customers saying about the Polytec NIR? Is it saving time and any issues? It does give you that that summary data right as you're harvesting. It is going to add a little bit more time depending on the type of combine you have, because typically your NIR scan is going to be happening after the grain gauge is finished. But what we've typically will do is we'll create some staging gates so that you can start harvesting into the next plot while the NIR data is separated by a staging gate, and NIR data is being collected on another plot. It just depends on the complexity of the combine you're using, whether it's a single or twin and some of those things. But I think overall people have been very happy with it and what it can do. As mentioned, let's see, the next one, what is the average time added? That really depends on the type of system you have. And again, if you're doing two plots, then we end up having to do some staging to make sure that the NIR can make its measurement on the left side, and while the right side is kind of waiting and then being able to present that grain. So again, we can send you and maybe sit down and talk a little bit more in detail about that. Let's see. Yeah, Moisture Wizard, we do have some wizards that allow you to generate moisture curves. So basically what it does is it steps you through first dumping a dry sample or entering the percentage of moisture of your known dry sample, cycling it through. You can cycle it through and it'll tell you to cycle it through once. If you want to cycle it through more times, it will step you through that. And then when you want to move to the next sample, it has you select an enter button, and then you can cycle multiple grain samples through multiple times to really fine tune your moisture sample. Again, we can send one of our have one of our service guys contact you and get you a little bit more information on that. Let's see. On the cone trip software, must the map be set up ahead of time, or can I just pull into a field and set a corner point and go? The only thing you really need to do ahead of time, really, you go into the field and you set your AB line to start. That's the only thing you have to do, set up. You don't have to set up a map ahead of time, just setting your AB line, and then you can it'll generate GPS position for each plot, and then you can go and start planting. Next question is, can you exit a test before completion and start a new test? I'm assuming this again has to do with the planter, but certainly on a grain gauge or on the with a grain gauge, you can exit and relocate and move to a new location. With the planter, I'm not 100% sure exactly the steps on this. As mentioned, you do have a pause button and a relocate button. So you can pause, you can relocate, and I think that would allow you to go to a new test as long as it's within the same field map that you have. Again, we can get in contact with you and talk more specific details in case I'm not fully understanding the question. So I think that's all the questions. Alan, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
No, I don't think so. Thanks, Keith. Good. Yeah. And thanks to everybody for their questions. Like I said, we didn't get everything exactly the way you wanted it or still have other questions. Yeah, get in contact with us and we will get you further information anyway on those. But anyway, appreciate the questions, appreciate everyone's time. And I guess
I just add that if there are specific webinars that you'd like to see in the future, maybe that are more training related webinars, send us an email. Our email's here. You can send Alan and I an email, and we can schedule those. We can do those company specific if you want to get to those, or we can do them as a more general on focusing on certain features and functions. We wanted this to be just a broad overview of what MIRUS and some of the MIRUS plugins, just so you had a better idea. But we'll certainly are willing to do other webinars that will help you understand the software better and how to do some of the things that are within the software. So with that, thanks everybody, and yeah, well, thanks for attending.